Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and we are into, my goodness, the final trilogy, chronologically speaking, of Mercedes Lackey's Valdemar series. Anything else that comes after this, as far as I am aware at this moment in time, is collections of short stories that I have not read. And again, as I did these in chronological order, that is, order of events happening within the Valdemar universe, as opposed to order of publication, there are things that have been published after this book that were written, in effect, before, that were written after the publication, but were set before these events. So this is the end of the line. I may at some point pick up some other things in this series. I may actually get around to reading the Spy Master series that Ms. Lackey has been working on, but as it stands, this last trilogy will be the end of my Valdemar series. So here we are. In the prior trilogy, we had the Mage Storms. We had, a big dramatic finale. We had the Blinding of Corral. We had an everything turns out okay in the end, more or less overall. Stefan and Vaniel have finally moved on and are not, hanging out in the Sorrows defending the North. So this book, it picks up several years later. Now, here's the thing. Darian, at the start of this book, despite what this image may imply, is literally 13 years old. He is basically just a kid. He's barely hit his teenage years. And so this is a kid who, he's grown up kind of in a sort of in a world after magic came to be part of Valdemar again. This is somebody who has not grown up as so many people in Valdemar did, not even being able to think about magic except as a thing that happened so long ago it's practically fiction. But, oh yes, I should mention, you notice those stickers on the front of this book, the $6.99 and $3.49 stickers? That's because this is a book that was purchased at one of my all-time favorite stores that doesn't exist anymore, and that is a Chapters store that they had big remainder tables there. Like, it was literally one of those barn-sized stores that's half remainders. So this book at the time retailed for $27.99 Canadian, and as you can see, it had been reduced to $6.99 and then down to $3.49. So I got a brand new hardcover, normally approximately $30 once you add in tax, copy of the book for $3.50. So this is one of my all-time favorite purchases because you don't get a better, price reduction than that purchased brand new from, a base retailer. Anyways, putting that aside, so this particular book, we start off with Darian, who he's been in practical terms orphaned. His parents disappeared something like a year before, and what you've got is very much, it's very much, kind of like those seabird, those gulls that get hatched by ducks, that there are gulls that will stick their eggs into duck nests, and then the gull chicks will sort of make their way out of the nest and head off into the wild blue yonder because they're not ducks. Darian is very much a not duck being raised by ducks. And So this book starts with Darian, and we do get very much of Darian's perspective, which is that he's constantly being told by people, oh, you should be grateful that we found somebody to take care of you. You should be really, really grateful to us. Your parents were the worst. Your parents probably got themselves killed. Your parents were probably going to get the rest of us killed. You should be glad that your parents had the decency to leave you behind so that when they got themselves killed, that we could attach you to somebody. And any time that he tried to explain himself, tried to say, look, I don't want to be a mage. I don't want to be apprenticed to the mage. I don't like being apprenticed to the mage. Anytime he tried to explain this, he would basically get it for back talk. Now, the book along its way does make it clear that Darian is maybe not the most tactful person to ever, cross the face of the earth. But it also makes it very, very clear that he's not cut out for this poor provincial life, and he belongs somewhere else. And interestingly enough, very early in the book, we get a lot of interactions between him and the villagers, and him and his mage master Justin, it turns out, is somebody who fought in the wars against Ankar, that he was one of the mages who got brought in to support the Valdemaran troops going up against Ankar. And he wound up basically, getting, almost dying, holding off retreat, but he suffered a massive head injury, and it basically meant that he could no longer do the magic he once did. Now, he appears to have just basically been a journeyman mage, but that's still a functional mage, and in the end, in a sort of a desperate bid to make something of himself, he signed up for and agreed to be sent off to one of the small villages in Valdemar, which had their healer and weather witch and whatnot stripped away from them, because Valdemar needed all of those resources at the other border to hold off Ankar. So he got sent up there, but he couldn't do magics. He couldn't do big magics. He couldn't do serious magics. And he had to give up his youthful dreams of being a great wizard for, being a local village healer. And when he saw Darian, he had this sudden thought, well, maybe I can't be a great mage, but I can be the teacher of a great mage. Except, of course, he made that cardinal error many people make, which is, oh yeah, everybody wants exactly what I want, and if I just grant them all of the things that I wished I'd had at that age, that they'll totally leap at it. Except, of course, Darian doesn't want to be a mage. And because Justin can't do any really powerful magics, any interesting magics, any serious magics, that everything that he does that has any practical value are things that are more easily achieved by somebody doing them by hand, Darian genuinely doesn't even see any reason to study magic. And so you have this back and forth between him and Justin, where Justin's not a bad guy, but he kind of toes that company line of, oh, you should be grateful for getting somebody who's nice to you, and so on. And interestingly enough, it is right before the village is invaded, and Justin has to, in effect, he has to do what is, in practical terms, a suicide self-bombing. It's the thing known as final strike, that is when a mage basically invokes all the power they have to make a big explosion. The more powerful the mage, the bigger the explosion. Justin's not that powerful, but it is enough for him to basically set fire to an entire bridge and wipe out at least a small portion of an army to try to hold them off. And give people a chance to get away. It's like right before that Justin finally says, no, I need to sit down and I should try talking to Darian. I need to figure out what he actually wants. Darian is rescued by a teledress because Darian was out in the woods, and in various events, the invaders catch up to him, and they're about to turn him into a body slave, which, not a body slave in the helping you dress kind of way, but a body slave in the, oh look, we're going to have a small boy to do many horrifying sexual things to. So he's rescued by a teledress, Snowfire, who basically, by the end of the book, in effect adopts him. And Snowfire is the one who first shows Darian that magic has practical value, because he's able to use magic to tie off and seal a bandage, and Darian is left exclaiming, oh, magic can be useful, because Darian had been looking for some way to tie off the bandage and didn't have one. And so that's Darian's first experience of, oh, magic can be useful. And it's the first time that someone explains to Darian why he needs to have a gift trained. And because Snowfire takes the time to treat him as a thinking person rather than a helpless child, Darian goes along with him and is willing to start getting training, is willing to do a whole bunch of things, precisely because, unlike the people in the village who assumed that Darian was like their own children and incapable of functioning without all of this help and coddling from adults, because he is assumed to be able to function, Darian responds much better. At the same time, of course, though, Snowfire is the one to point out to Darian that, considering yourself as compared to their children wouldn't have been able to handle the things Darian could, precisely because the children didn't have Darian's background. Along the way, Darian meets... Now, the Teledress are on a mission following the end of the mage storms to basically try to arrange for the magic to fall back into ley lines and properly, and also to make sure that all of this magic, which has basically been stirred up and turned into a useless sort of free-floating form from the way it used to be, to try to make sure that nobody sort of takes advantage of it and takes control of it and keeps it away from everyone else, so that the only people who can use it are selfish, horrible, evil people. And on this little expedition is a griffin, Kelvrin here, who is a very young griffin. He's kind of like a new graduate of the Silvers of the Kaleda Inn. You remember that offshoot of the original group from which the Teledras and Shinna Inn both sprang. We had much discussion of Kaleda in the previous in the previous couple of books. So you had that, and here's a picture of Snowfire in his role as a scout. And lastly, just because I continue to find the Invader's Mage to be the weirdest drawing that Larry Dixon has that I've ever seen of Larry Dixon's. This is weird. Anyways, by the end, they managed to drive the invaders out, and Darian, having been sort of provisionally adopted by the Teledras, is basically the plan is for him to go off with the Teledras and be adopted by them, be raised by them, be trained by them, and then he would come back to the village and give them the mage that they're going to need long term. And the second book in this series picks up after Darian is now in his late teens, has been traveling for a while, but that's the next book. So I will leave you here with the Invader's Mage staring at you, and really, this is the worst thing by Larry Dixon I have ever seen. And I'll see you all next week.